All right, we're back at it. I'm here with Esteban Roque from Momentum Construction. And today we're going to be talking about best practices and timelines and how it works in pulling a permit for your fix and flip rehab, how to save yourself time and effort and make your rehabs ELF, which is easy, lucrative, and fun instead of half, hard, annoying, lame, and frustrating. So we're going to break this out into 4 or 5 little quick categories. One, we're going to start with the mindset of the dreaded word sometimes for flippers is permitting. You want to avoid a red tag. So the mindset, the timeline, how you can manage your timeline so that you can actually just fly through a project, even if it's complicated. Who's involved in the permitting process? Expectations, best practices, pitfalls, and then we'll kind of end with a little mindset and an example of how we feel like we executed pretty well by using a permit. So to start with the mindset, I hear flippers all the time, and you've probably talked to some clients as well, that you avoid the permit. You don't want to do it because the city's evil, the inspectors are dumb, they don't know what they're doing, it's going to delay things, it's going to cost more money. And I think if you don't do it right, I think you're right. It's like I think Henry Ford said, if you think you can't do it, you can't do it. Something like that, right? Like if you don't think it's going to be easy, if you don't think you can make it more efficient, then it's going to be hard. But having that mindset of, especially we're in Salt Lake City, we did a $150,000 remodel on this house. Odds are an inspector's going to drive by. What we don't want to have happen is to start work, be taping up the windows with painter's tape, trying to pretend like we're not doing a big remodel, and then having an inspector come in and giving us a red tag. What is a red tag? That means we got to stop work. The city's going to be pissed off at us. Then we've got to start from scratch to get permits. We've got to scramble to make sure we're hiring people that are licensed. We got to get permit numbers, contractor licenses. And what's it going to do? It's going to really delay our project way more than it would if we just leaned in up front and said, this is a house where most likely we're going to need a permit. Let's not avoid it. Let's make it ELF. Let's make the permitting process easy, lucrative, and fun. Because what's going to happen? You're going to have more confidence in doing the project. You're going to do a better job. You're going to do it quicker. And ultimately, you're going to save money. So let's now talk about the timeline. When we get a house under contract, sometimes houses, say a wholesale deal, you do not have a lot of time. So you might be delayed a little bit in your process to start your timeline, or compressed, I should say, because you might need to close like in a couple of days. But however much time you have, once you've committed on the project, let's talk about some of the things that we're learning to do right away that will save us time later.
The one thing that you can do to save you time is start using tools like Cubic Casa. Because once you do the first walkthrough, you're committed to the property, you come by, you use the tool, and you can produce a blueprint of the house. Very accurate, not exactly accurate, but very accurate, and you can later on start working on your plans and start working on your game plan.
Yep, that tool, if you're realtors, or I think you can access it even if you're not a realtor, but realtors get it for free as part of their board fees, is every time we get a house and we know we're committed to it, we come through and we take video walkthrough and pictures, and then we do the Cubic Casa so we can get a 2D floor plan, upstairs, downstairs, however many levels of the house there are, so we can start thinking through what walls we might be moving, where we're going to put bathrooms, bedrooms, how we're going to combine rooms, what rooms we're going to open up. But then what does it do to the architect or the guy that's going to do the CAD drawings to submit to the city?
It's going to make it more easier for them, like way easier, because they don't have to come by and spend probably 6 to 8 hours measuring the house, making sure that they have the right measurements or whatever they need.
Yeah.
And that will save them just a lot of time. So, which means then they will charge you less.
Yeah. It'll be easier. It gives you more confidence when you have an accurate drawing of the floor plan. Organize your files on your computer so that everybody on your team can access the floor plans, access the videos. What that also does by documenting things the right way is you don't have to spend as much time driving back and forth to the property to re-look at things. Now, sometimes on a more complicated remodel, we often do this where you do need to come back a couple of times just with a fresh perspective to go like, no, I think you're right. We should beam this wall here. We should open it up here. So sometimes you also need to bring in somebody maybe that has a better vision, if you don't have it, of how to lay out the house. Let's talk about, just for a quick minute, what are some things that we've learned that you really need to look out for that sometimes you don't think about in the moment when you're considering redesigning a floor plan?
The one thing that gets most overlooked is the bearing walls.
Yep.
Everybody gets confused about if that wall is going to be a bearing wall or not. So the best practice is bring an engineer so he can tell you exactly which walls are bearing. But if not, you just got to determine where does the wall sit. Most likely, if the wall sits in the middle of the house, that's a bearing wall.
Yep.
So that's
other things are like the flue to the furnace, trunk lines. This house is an old house where they had an old chimney stack, and so sometimes. But we've also navigated those where we've figured out a way to tear them down, and then it opens up a whole bunch of space. So you're always battling the cost to do it, the benefit to do it, and if it's even possible. I love doing these smaller, like 1,000 square foot one level houses, because like we open this one up, for example, and it feels so much larger.
It feels way bigger
than it really is. And sometimes it just takes thinking through it a little bit. We beamed this structurally, so it's all good. So we'll talk briefly here in a minute about who's involved. You mentioned an engineer. That's going to be important. Let's kind of wrap up this part about timeline. So as soon as possible, before your money is costing you money to buy the house, let's do as much work as possible. So the QB Casa, the video walkthrough, then you're going to need somebody that can do what with the 2D floor plans, because where we're going to go now is we're going to need to submit this to the city.
Correct. Right? Yeah. You will need either a draftman or an architect, depending on the complexity of your project.
Yep. Okay. So then let's start working on that right away, because in an ideal world on a timeline, we want to have that permit submitted to the city
right away,
day we buy the house, if not sooner, right?
Yes.
Because what does that do? That speeds up our process. Now, once we've submitted the permit application to the city, what is our comfort level with the house then?
Then you're not afraid of inspectors driving by. Then you're not afraid of neighbors calling you on things that you probably are, like a dumpster in the front yard or debris from construction. You're not afraid of any of that, and you can move quickly. You can move with a breeze.
So we've oftentimes, and I feel comfortable saying this because I don't think we're going out of bounds here, is once we have that permit application in, we can start demoing. We can start performing general work.
Yes.
And that will speed us up. And then, like you said, we're not afraid of like an inspector driving by. Because if an inspector drives by, we go, oh, hey, Jim, permit's on file, man.
Yes, sir.
We're ready to go. We're going to be excited to have you come and do the first round of inspections.
That's right.
So then let's just talk about timeline. What typically then, how long does it take right now? And I know every city's a little different, but the more prepared you are when you submit the permit, the less likely you're going to have red line comments come back. But typically, how long is it taking from submittal to permit to getting the permit approved?
So the cities, they have by law a limited amount of time to review your plans. So they will take between 14 to 21 business days.
Okay.
So minimum, the city has 14 business days to review your plans. Said and done. If the city wants to take the longest, they will take 21 business days. And that's typically how long it will take the city.
So if things go quick, you're going to have your permit in 2 to 3 weeks. That's nothing. By then, your demo's done and you're ready to get going. Let's quickly talk about, is the city our friend or foe when we're dealing with the permits?
It's just going to be ultimately depend on you.
Yep.
Because the more prepared you are and the more understanding of your blueprints are going to be, you're going to make the job easier for the city. So the easier the job is for the city to review your plans, the friendly they're going to be. If your plans are going to be crappy plans where they don't understand what's going on, they don't see the scope of work, they don't see, they saw, then you don't know what you're doing, or there is no clear scope of work, then they're going to be like, okay, I need to know more information. So the more information you give to the city and the better prepared you are, then the friendlier the city will be.
Yeah, I think inspectors the inspectors, the planning, the permitting desk, they're kind of usually dealing with a bunch of complaints and
Yeah.
angry people of the public demanding that they get their plans approved. So
Yeah.
the more friendly we can be with these people, the happier they're going to be.
Yeah.
Odds are the quicker they're going to work to turn around our plans. So I would say you're always going to have a grumpy, person at the city you're working with, but let's be friendly with them and give them what they want. Now, not that we're going to bend or concede something that we don't need to, but let's just be prepared. Okay, so we got the permit. Then typically, how many inspections are there throughout the process? Talking about timeline again.
Yeah, sure. Throughout the process, you will have about 4 to 6 inspections, depending on your scope of work too. Like the most important one is going to be your four-way inspection.
Yep.
That's when the inspector comes and review all your mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and framing.
So the reality is, if we're prepared, it's not the big bad wolf. We're going to have to deal with them a couple of times throughout the process.
Yeah, and
no big deal.
That will take you, or that will increase your timeline at most for a week if you count every day of the inspection they will need it.
Yeah, and then a lot of times I hear people say like, that inspector is such an idiot. And maybe he is, but I think the reality is you're the idiot because you don't know the code of the standard. So understand when you're pulling a permit what egress windows you need to cut.
Yeah, that's true.
What quality of plumbing or whatever it is, right? Like understand what they're going to ask because they're probably not the idiot. You're probably the idiot because you don't know what you're doing, right?
Or either you hire the wrong people to do the job.
Yeah, that's true. So we're going to talk about who in just a second. And then you're done with the inspectors when?
But you're done with the inspectors when you finish and complete the project and you schedule a final inspection.
Great, done. Then you're done with them. High five, we're on our way. Stress is over.
And then you move to the next one and they're happier because they saw
they're happier. Yes, every time you do it the right way.
Yeah.
It becomes so much easier. Especially, we did a video before about like your next best flip is probably in the same neighborhood, the same type of home as your last flip. Same with inspectors. You're going to end up dealing with the same guys and they'll be like, oh, it's Esteban again.
Yeah.
Oof. It's usually a pleasant visit. It's not a battle. Okay,
No,
so let's talk about who now. Who is involved in this process? Obviously, the owner, the flipper, the investor has a big say, right? Who else is involved in this process?
Your architect and draftman, which we briefly mentioned a little bit ago, which he's going to be the one putting in the plan your vision of what you want to do with the house. Then if you're going to remove any bearing walls, your engineer.
Yep.
And then in the city process, then you will have to talk about 4 people.
One guy you're missing. Who's performing the work? You're going to need a license.
You're going to need a licensed contractor.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if you have a licensed contractor, can that license cover all of the other trades like HVAC, plumbing, electrical?
It depends on the city.
Okay.
Some cities allow it. Some cities ask you to specifically bring a licensed electrician and a licensed plumber.
So that's a good point for a lot of things. Just because Salt Lake does it one way does not mean Sandy, Mill Creek, Salt Lake County is going to do it the same way. So understand the process so you don't get frustrated because you're ignorant to how the process works.
Correct.
So then, of course, we're obviously working with the city, and so inside of the city, typically the people that you're dealing with.
Yeah, so inside the city, there is these 4 main people, which is the executive or the administrative assistant, which is the one who reviews the plans that you're submitting. She makes sure then you're not submitting something incomplete. Then you have your zoning, your building, and your public utilities reviewer. So you gotta comply with all of them in order to get your permit.
Yeah. Sometimes like cities also will have certain requirements that other cities don't have. Sometimes in Salt Lake, you got to do a sewer inspection or a sewer scope. Other cities might not require that. If you're up in the mountains, maybe you're going to have like fire sprinklers or, extra calculations needed for the load of a roof because of snow. So again, understand what you're getting into so that it's not frustrating for you and seem like a surprise. And it's probably not the inspector being a bad guy. It's you just not understanding what he's requiring.
That's correct.
Okay, so we've got possibly an engineer, the owner of the home, the flipper, the contractor, the city, and then obviously you're going to have the individual inspectors that are coming out. And then the other who's to this is make sure you're hiring competent subcontractors that also understand city code.
Correct, yeah. So typically, in order to make the inspector, the work of the inspector easier or the job of the inspector easier, then you gotta have someone who knows what they're doing.
Yeah. 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 If I'm in charge of plumbing, we're never getting the permit completed because, you know, I'm going to screw up like 25 times. So get the right person for the right job. Okay. Expectations, pitfalls, frustrations, best practices.
Once you're in the project, the most frustrating thing for an inspector is not to have the project clean.
Okay.
Believe it or not, as simple as it sounds, if your project is all messy, meaning you have debris of construction everywhere, the inspector is tripping over, then he falls, and then you laugh, man, that's done.
That's a really good point, though. Sometimes, you know, not that we're trying to sneak one over the inspector, but if everything is nice and clean and tight and needy, there's going to be an expectation of like, oh, these guys know what they're doing.
Exactly. Yeah, so keep your job site clean. That's one of the top things that I would say. Whenever I'm walking through a job site or whenever the inspectors tell stories about job sites, they mostly complain about job sites that are like a mess.
Yeah, that's a good one.
They don't like that at all.
What about frustrations with subcontractors? What are some key things that you've learned that you can overcome by just understanding that it's going to be a little bit of a challenge?
Yeah, so just communicating to the subcontractors when the inspector is going to be here. Because if the inspector is here and they have questions, the inspector wants those questions answered.
Yep.
But if you're not, for whatever reason, you're not capable to answer those questions, they're going to be like, okay, I don't know, I'm failing you. But if you have your subcontractors doing the type of the inspection, then whenever the inspector is going to have questions, your electrician is going to be there to answer.
Yeah.
Your plumber is going to be there to answer. Your HVAC subcontractor will be there. And then he feels like, oh yeah, I have the whole team here to answer everything that I need, and I will approve it.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Any other best practices or common pitfalls? And then we can kind of end with the mindset, kind of including that the reality is as much as you plan and prepare, it's still just not going to always go exactly the way you think because of different things. Maybe we'll just talk about it right now.
Sure.
Maybe the inspector cancels on you and you got to do it the next day. Maybe the inspectors just come off of a really awful inspection and he's a little grumpy. Or maybe your plumber doesn't show up. I mean, there could just be delays that just happen sometimes. So it's like just knowing that there could be some frustrations.
And the biggest frustration for the inspector is when you think, then he doesn't know. Meaning you're trying to hide something from him. Then he knows, then you're trying to hide.
Yep.
And then he's going to ask you the questions like, do you do this? Do you do that? And then how do you do it? And if you're trying to sneak a quick one on them and you're trying to hide something from them, but they know what's going on, once they find out, you are like crossover forever.
Yeah, they're not stupid. They have the job for a reason. They have a skill set, and it's like most things in life, communication, right?
That's right.
If you're not prepared and you didn't realize it, just call them and tell them, dude, I'm so sorry. I don't want to waste your time.
Exactly.
You know, and on the flip side, you'll get that reciprocity from them. You know, and the same thing with your subs, and then. As the flipper or an investor, you know, you got to make sure you're hiring the competent people so you can let them do their job. I don't know enough about the permitting process. I'm not going to like be yelling at Esteban going, why didn't you get this done? Because I'm probably just acting out of fear and frustration, you know. So one thing we can talk about is, let's go back to what I mentioned at the first as far as, you know, timeline and expectation. How many of you watching this have tried to fly under the radar by not getting an inspection, but then you get caught and red tagged because your mindset up front is like, well, I'm going to save time and money. I don't want to pay the extra $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 to get a permit, draft plans. We know what we're doing. We're all doing it to code anyway. Then all of a sudden you get red tagged. Now you're angry, you're frustrated, you're defensive, you're acting out of fear. And what happens? Odds are you have hard money on the project. This one was like a $450,000 purchase. We're ticking at $4,500 a month. It's not uncommon to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 month delay because of a red tag versus virtually no time wasted by doing it the way we've talked about. That's $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 that you just flushed down the toilet because you didn't plan ahead. So being proactive with the end in mind, what are we going for? We'll save you a ton of time and money. And I love these phrases from Joe Polish and Genius Network. You want this to be ELF. Easy, lucrative, and fun, but most times we self-inflict ourselves and we make it hard, annoying, lame, and frustrating. So we're going to quickly end with, and we'll do a deeper dive in a video about this house, but we're at 2607 South 2100. I got those wrong. Yeah, east and west, but we're in Salt Lake, just off of Foothill Boulevard. This house is about 2,000 square feet. We got, from the time we started the permit process to the final inspection, was 110 days.
110 days.
About $150,000 remodel, structural beam, redoing the whole basement layout, inside, outside, egress windows. You know, it was a small house, but we really did the full scope of work on this thing. And our goal was 100 days. But if you're flipping and your remodel's done in less than 4 months from the day you bought it, you can get in and out in that 6-month window and really reduce your time on the market, your interest expense, and make your flip a lot better. So to summarize, be conscious of the timeline that it takes to get the permit, be efficient in how you do it, hire the right people, understand who's involved, understand what they're going to want, not want, and how to work with them. Learn the best practices, have the expectation that it's not always going to be amazing, but it will be a lot better than not doing it. And then just, you know, have that mindset that, like, this is just part of the process of flipping a house. And unfortunately, or fortunately, we live in a world where you got to abide by rules and laws and stuff like that. Make it ELF, don't make it half. And
be upfront. That's the one thing I would say. Be upfront and be open to the city and to the inspectors, because they know what you're doing. They just wanted you to follow the rules.
Yep.
That's it. And as long as you follow the rules, you give them what they want. You tell them what you're doing. You're not hiding anything. Then the process is going to be way smoother and way easier for all the parties involved.
I love it. Go win, go get better, and we'll catch you on the next one.